When I first started doing public seminars using behavioral assessment, sometimes I found people left an assessment behind. Ooh, that concerned me. I went back and I looked at the assessment, and in all cases, it was a high C. And I looked at myself and said, Bill, you failed. Nobody can leave here feeling bad about themselves. And then I realized that with my style, I tend to play the D's and the I's and don't maybe do a good enough job with S's and C's. So I'm pointing this out to you, is that you want to make for sure that everybody leaves your place a winner. And now I'd like to talk to you about two winners to prove my point. Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, both great golfers. Totally different approach. Arnie was a high I. Arnie was known as the salesman that put golf really on the map. Jack Nicklaus came across as the best all-time winner, but if you met Jack and you talked to Jack, he would tell me it was 14 clubs, same swing. I followed him around on a tournament out here in Scottsdale, and he said, wow. He said, I mishit that putt. It's important to distinguish whether you mishit or misread. Because if you misread and you think you mishit, you'll make a change and it's the wrong change. You got to understand yourself. You got to understand your swing. So we had two different winners that won differently. And I really think that this is important to share with every audience. And I'm going to also talk about some other people's graphs so that you can get some ideas on how to share this information to the various groups that you work with. Also, we have more of this information in the Universal Language Book where you can discover graphs from different people. Over the years, we've actually got quite a few famous people through our behavioral system. Here I want to talk about some various individuals that I've had the pleasure of either getting their graph or meeting them personally. We all have heard about Charles Barkley if you follow basketball at all. And Charles is very unique. It's easy to see that he's a high D. When he had the ball, he wanted to do it his way. He would back down. He was in charge. And then I say to you, could you win the NBA if you had 5 Charles Barkleys on your team? I have never heard one person that knew him that would say yes. I would say, could you win with 5 Michael Jordans? A lot of people say maybe, because Michael Jordan was a different person and would adapt and adjust his style to fit his teammates and make them operate as a team. So we can talk about and we can see their various styles. I've had the pleasure of being in the Suns locker room, talking to the coach, and I also had the pleasure of assessing all of the Suns players. I want to talk about a couple of them. Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway was a great college player, point guard. He was a high C. He never made it in the pros. The pros can't take time to think. It's all got to be a reaction. And the high C was too much in planning. So Penny Hardaway never ever came on to make it. I think his son now, Penny Hardaway Jr., is doing quite well. But he was a high C that could not adjust. But he was a machine at shooting. So he was actually selected because of his shooting. And then when you put him in point guard to run the team as a high C, things move too fast for the high C. They need to be more like Steve Nash. Okay, we also want to talk about Rodney Rogers. Rodney Rogers was a high C. Rodney Rogers played for the Suns. He was 6th man of the year. As a starter, he was never very good. And here's my interpretation. On the bench, Rodney was a high S. He watched the game. He observed the game. He knew what was going on in the game. And when the coach put him in, he knew what to do. As a starter, the coach never told him what his role was. He couldn't observe what his role was. He couldn't sort of get that same feel from playing that he could get from the bench. So here is an understanding of a unique person, a high S, 6th man of the year. And if we would have taken and talked to him about, here's your role as a starter. Here's what I want you to do with this team. He could have been a starter, all right? So this is what I'm saying. This is so much fun to be able to look at people, look at the situation, and sort of go through your mind what's going on in their mind and giving us a natural type of answer that makes people feel good about themselves. We also have Donald Trump, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton. I like to talk about Richard Nixon because he was a high D, high S. One thing about high D, high S is they're good at a few things. Nixon was very good at a few things, but he had a low I. What impact do you think the low I actually had with Watergate? Do you think he had low trust, and the only way he could really find out something was to see that we collected the real data, the hard data, to find out what was going on, that he was really concerned about losing? Yeah, think about that. Again, look at these graphs. Use graphs like this from people you know, from other teams, other winners, to be able to explain stories so that everybody in your seminars or in your consulting goes away knowing that they are a winner. A number of years ago, I learned that I was very visual. And I used to talk to people about graphs, this person had that graph, and they didn't understand what I was talking about. So I designed a wheel where I could actually plot the various people on the wheel and then show the wheel and talk about the uniqueness and the difference of various spokes on the wheel. And it worked. Now we can show people, a group of people or two people or a person at a job using the wheel, and it makes a great visual to really demonstrate exactly what it is we're talking about. On our wheel, we have 60 different locations where you can plot people based on their graph. I've done research on all 60 of those, and there is a little over 1% of our population in each and every one of those 60 plot points. When I designed the wheel, I actually designed two of them, one without graphs and one with graphs. I need to see the graphs when I'm plotting people doing research. But a lot of times I didn't want other people to see the graph, so we just plot them in a point, but not show them the graph. So this is why we have the two different wheels, one with graphs, one without graphs. Also, we have the wheel with descriptors around the wheel in the 8 different points, so that it makes it easier for people to see exactly information about those people that happen to be plotted in that particular section of the wheel. Again, when showing a large group of people, the various people in their team or in the organization, it gives a good feel. And it's great when you have a team that's actually around the wheel as compared to just one part of the wheel. Because it's not good to have a team with everybody exactly alike. You know, I quite often say to people, what do you think would happen to the United States if all Supreme Court justices were high Ds? We'd have landmark decisions every Monday morning. It would not add the stability that we get from our country by having D, I, S, and C people, because the S's and C's do provide a lot of stability, which is good for our society. I've had a lot of fun with this wheel, with words that don't work. I was over in Sweden giving a speech, and when I started off the speech, I asked a question. Has anybody in the audience ever met somebody they didn't like? Let's see your hands. A few hands came up. And then I asked for a volunteer. I'd like a volunteer, and I want you to describe this person you do not get along with using only 3 adjectives. They described it. They used the 3 adjectives. I walked down from the podium, went over by this person, pulled up a chair, sat down by them, and started talking to them about themselves. By understanding words that don't work with people, by understanding adjectives that don't work for people, I'm able to identify where they fit on the wheel. So we have this wheel with the words that don't work. And we have current research using the EEG brain imaging equipment to prove that not only don't these words work, we have new words that we're going to be sharing with you in the future that don't work because we have the research coming from the brain. On this wheel, I plotted both the natural and the adapted style of this person. Wow, what's going on in their life? We're to see this big a change. You see how this visual would point that out to this person, where they're coming from and where they're going to. Now, I have seen a high D who is actually adapting behavior to be a high C. And I said, what's going on? He said, I'm a CPA and it's tax season. It really makes sense because that's what you have to be during tax season. And you ought to see them April 15th. They're so pleased that they can go back and be the real person. Again, the stress that is accounted by adapting behavior that is not natural to you. But this visual really allows the people to see themselves, and they come away saying, I am okay. There's nothing major wrong with you. It's tax season, and I must do this to be successful, and I'm willing to pay the price for success during tax season. Could you imagine trying to explain to a manager the difference between top and bottom performers without the use of the wheel? See, I plot the wheel up there. I don't even have to have names on it. I have to say, here's people that are in your bottom, here's people in your top. They have different styles. They have different behavior. Now, I will remind you that we also have to look at some of those other sciences to look at the total cause and reason behind that. But this is to look at the behavior and how behavior is impacting performance on this job at that place under that management.